Here's how I balanced a 99th percentile UCAT and a 99.85 ATAR. Number one is mindset. I personally am of the opinion that whenever I do a test, whether I do well or poorly is less important than how well I prepared for the test. So if I do all I can with my studying, if I work hard and I do my best, if I get 50%, then so be it. There's nothing I could have done differently. If I get 99%, then great. Maybe that was the just reward for the effort I put in. And so I think that takes a bit of the pressure off when you go into an exam. But I think the key with all of these things is preparation. If I feel good about my preparation, then I know I'm going in fulfilling my potential and at my peak performance by the exam time. The times where I most regret or feel really bad after the exams are times when I sense I could have given a little bit more, I could have done a bit better. And I think that mindset would have pushed me in both UCAT and ATAR to going, quite to an intense level. So in terms of actually balancing them and the volume of study, I was studying a lot. I think it was probably lockdown when I was studying at my most, and I would have been maybe starting at 9 a.m. and going till 10 p.m. watching an episode of Gossip Girl from 10 to 11 and then sleeping at 11 and probably waking up at 8 and then repeating that for most days. It wasn't fun, it wasn't particularly enjoyable, but I got a lot of stuff done and I improved a lot. And for me, it was meaningful. So I never felt bored or that this was a waste. I always knew that I was working towards something, and I knew that once I'd finished year 12, I'd look back and say, this was a necessary sacrifice. So did I enjoy year 12? No. There were parts of it that I enjoyed, but the level of studying and work was not enjoyable. And I feel for everyone going through it now, I think it is at a stage where though to get the super high marks, the people who do get them are the ones that really push themselves. And so how did I balance the UCAT and ATAR? I tried to do the UCAT earlier on in the day. You'll find that when you sit it, it's a very draining test. And so let's say I'm starting at 9, maybe 9 to 1 is my UCAT time, and I'll just try and get as much UCAT done as I can. Then I'll have break for lunch, and then from 1 to 10 p.m. is my ATAR time when I'm working on all the subjects. I think consistency is the most important. I'll never miss a day of UCAT, and I'd never miss a day of ATAR. And even if you have a busy day, just try and find ways to start off with a little bit of UCAT. If you're going to school and you're coming home at 5, can you do 1 or 2 sets of UCAT before you go into your ATAR things? And I think you'll find that most people end of term 1, end of term 2, their UCAT goes nowhere or goes down because they're so busy with all their SACs. But I think the key is to try and be consistent and always find room to practice at least probably two sets a day, I think, and a bit more on the weekends. Another thing that's quite underrated is just to start early, to use the holidays for your UCAT and your ATAR prep. So in the holidays, I would get my maths book and complete all the questions in the textbook for that whole term, and then school itself was just a revision. And I'd always try and stay a couple of weeks ahead with tutoring and with going through the textbook myself of school. So school itself was just a revision. And then probably 2 weeks before the SACs, then I'm sort of collating things in notes, doing a bit more deep dive on the subject and doing that sort of last minute cram just to top up the marks. But I am always of the opinion that a bit of pre-reading to have a good foundation, school is the revision, and then the rest is just practice questions after that. So a natural question to ask is, when you're working so much, did you get burned out and what was that like? And I think for me, I don't really have long-standing periods of burnout, but I can sense if I've had a few too many days of being overworked that I need to change something. And for me, I probably only need 1 day off. And when I say day off, it's like a half day where I just can relax, and maybe that's, going out, although sometimes going out I find quite tiring in itself. It might just be watching movies, sleeping at 8 or 9 p.m, going for a walk outside, and sometimes by 2 p.m. I'm just done, my brain's fried, and I just need, that rest of the afternoon off. But I find most of the time by the next day, I can go back to it again. So I don't really have the experience of long-standing burnout. Other people might, but I think it's important just to factor that in. And so I think you do need periods of rest amongst all this studying. There is the mindset that every single second you have could be spent studying and achieving this magical semblance of perfection. And I think that was probably a bit too much in my mind. I remember I always used to, as a break, when I was had a bit of a headache, just go out and play some cricket in the backyard, throwing a ball against the wall. And I honestly think that was actually a really good thing to do retrospectively. At the time, it was just, a bit of fun, and I thought I was, you're not at peak efficiency, but just to get outside, to do something you love, to stop thinking about things. I highly recommend just a bit of sport, exercise, and just being outside. Go for a walk. I think that is a more effective form of rest than video games, TV. I actually think those things they seem like rest, but they almost tire you out or keep you at the same. If I watch a full movie, I'm tired after it. And so I always used to watch my Gossip Girl at the end of the day. So with all this pursuit of meaning in the sense of all the work that you do, where does the happiness factor into it? And I think there is room to keep up with your passions. If you love sport, music, for me, I always would play some cricket every day at home in the backyard. But honestly, the highlight, I think, of year 12 was once a week just playing Among Us with all my friends online. And I definitely don't regret, using that time just for fun. I think important events, formals, etc., you should always just go to those and enjoy them if you're the type of person that does. I don't think any one study session is worth the sacrifice of that. So there is obviously a balance, but I think to get your regular day-to-day optimized for studying, and then all these sporadic events, or if you want once a week, do these things. If you work once a week or go out with your friends once a week, I think those things are worthwhile, because if you completely cut them out, I think that's when people get into the more long-standing issues with burnout and mental health. If I did year 12 again, what would I do? What would my advice be to you? What would I do differently? I think I would still have the mindset that this year will be a sacrifice, and once you get to uni, you won't have to work as hard. I think I would still use the holidays to try and get ahead. I would schedule more frequent rest breaks, in the sense of more walks. I'd exercise more, and I wouldn't feel guilty about time with friends, time with family, time doing hobbies that you enjoy. I would try and study. I think you have to study smart and hard. So looking back, there were ways that I studied which were a waste of time. And so I would, from the start, try and work out how can I most efficiently learn, how can I most efficiently use my time, and allocate it to that. But I don't think year 12 is one of those settings for most high-achieving people where they say, I'm going to study 2 hours a day and then just optimize the rest of my life for my happiness. And so I think the most important aspects of how I got 99th percentile UCAT and a 99.85 ATAR are consistency, preparation, finding meaning in what you do, and finding those small pockets of happiness and ways to rest that allow you to keep going long term. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And I'd be happy to discuss things further with anyone if you have any questions or would like any more advice. Thanks so much, guys, and I will see you next week.